skinny doorways.
I've never noticed that. That is a small door.
I'm here for moral support.
Okay. You're the pro. You've been.
Stop.
You used
Yeah, you
to
gotta
actually be on the radio.
Huh?
You were on the radio.
Yeah. You talking to this one, right?
Do you use the headphones or no?
Yes. Yeah.
You like to use them?
You guys don't? You don't?
Why
We've
do you use
used
them?
them
I mean,
once.
we wore them, but nobody talks to you, right? Or do you hear everybody else talking? It is.
It just, I don't know. It's just, we used to do radio, and you just always wear the headphones. In fact, we joke about it. It's like I don't want to talk to you unless you have your headphones on.
Oh yeah, you got to do without headphones again. Oh.
Can
we gonna wear the
talk without headphones?
Can you think?
I don't think I can.
I can hear you better.
How about now? Is this good?
Really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. It just seems like
I
the
feel
right
like
thing
I'm
to
in
do.
It's like a spacesuit.
It's
I feel like I'm in.
a spacesuit.
I feel like I'm in a spacesuit.
Well, if you guys aren't going to wear your headphones, I
Well, we'll
will.
wear
Well,
headphones.
are they necessary to the success of the sound? Like it makes it sound
No,
better?
no.
The engineer wears them just to make sure everything's balanced, but you don't.
Put them back on
That's
right
just
now.
Our old radio.
Well-
our old radio.
Now take them off.
Now, Brian, I'm a pilot, so we wear them in the cockpit, and the other, you're sitting right next to the guy, and he's talking to you. And it's
Yeah.
So it's the
I
same
get it.
thing.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah.
It's the
Right.
Same thing,
It's the
but
thing.
different. So we're on.
Yeah.
We are.
Well, I don't know.
No.
Wait, I'll have
I hear you now.
headphones on.
You're 8x8, as we say in aviation
Is
parlance.
that what it is?
Right.
Great. Cool.
You know, I always wanted to be a pilot.
Okay.
Yeah,
You
I was
can
gonna-
be.
It's not too late.
Well, you know, I wanted to be like a helicopter pilot, you know, and in high school, and that's the only other profession I would consider other than what I'm doing now is a pilot. I always wanted to.
Good professional choice. Are we on?
I
We're
think
live.
he's
Well,
about
that's
to
even
close the
good.
door.
This is real live radio. Hi, this is Doc. I never had a bad day in my life. Welcome. Happiness is a choice. In the studio today, we have Stacy, my daughter,
Hi.
and my wife Sharon,
Hi.
and Brian Donovan.
Yes.
And Stacy, introduce Brian for me.
So
please.
today's very impromptu. I was really excited when I walked in the doors of the Village Workshop and saw my friend Brian Donovan, who about a month ago when we first started this, I asked if you would do a show
Yeah.
with us, and you said yes. So I seized that opportunity today.
See, I thought it
when
was a karaoke show though, so I was ready to sing.
You can sing. You can. You're on.
Somebody lay down a fat beat. I want to
You're
sing.
you're the seasoned pro. So you have Animal Talk Radio.
Yeah, we've had that. It was originally a radio show, and we syndicated it. We were in about 40 markets at the high point. We were somebody. We had autograph cards.
What happened?
To the autograph cards, I still have them in an unopened box.
Yeah?
No. Well, you know, radio. There's a lot of consolidation going on in radio. Radio's a tough business, very tough business, and we were working with a syndicator, and then we were self-syndicated for a while. But it's hard to, we're talking about wearing a lot of hats. It's hard to do your show, sell your airtime, and do everything. And I was doing other activities, and it was just kind of a sideline thing for me. But it's one of those things you can check out anytime you want, but you can never leave. You always want to get back into it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So you have a really varied and I think super interesting background. Other people agree, so I'm not the only one who thinks that, which was why I wanted to have you on the show eventually. Can you tell us a little bit about what you started out doing? You were kind of the Caesar Milan before Caesar Milan.
Well, I came from, my father was a factory worker and a blue-collar guy. And I thought I didn't want to do that. He would complain about his job every day.
My dad, by the way, Brian, this is a true story. My dad was a factory worker too, but not really. He was a black-collar guy. He was a coal miner.
Okay.
In England.
Yeah. So
And I didn't want to do that either.
and I knew there were people who owned their own businesses, but I didn't know anything about that. I thought it was a different breed of people. I thought it was a different species.
Well,
actually.
we are.
And
And you know that now.
And so I told my dad one day, I want to train dogs. I got a knack for it. I've been working at this kennel. I was like 19 years old, and I want to have my own business. And he said, "Oh, you can't have your own business. Other people do that." And so I set out strictly out of spite to spite my dad, and I realized when I got the first check, it's like, wow, I don't need a job. I don't need someone to pay me to come into work. I could do this on my own.
Mm-hmm.
And I was hooked. I was absolutely hooked.
Right.
But we were talking in the hall, and you mentioned something that kind of clicked in me about an internal dialogue, how important it is to ask yourself the right questions.
Mm-hmm.
if you have a problem, say with drinking or with your weight or whatever, you say, a terrible question is to say, why am I out of shape? Because your brain's going to answer that question. You're out of shape because you're a fat slob and you can't get out of bed. That's what. To ask yourself better questions.
By the way, for those people out there in radio land, Brian was looking directly at me when he said that. I don't.
Not intentionally.
Can be incriminating.
Listen, fatty. I'm sorry. No, it's to ask yourself good questions, good quality questions. How can I get from here to there is a really good question.
Right.
Not why am I stuck here?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
How do I get there? How did that guy do it? How did she do it? That's and I was fortunate. I started reading books. Dale Carnegie, Wayne Dwyer, Tony Robbins,
Right.
and this stuff was revolutionary to me. I had never heard any of this stuff.
Me too.
And to be able to do things by force of will, that was a completely new concept. And I realized that it really is up to me. And like I said, I got hooked. I wanted to make my own decisions, good or bad. You fall a lot, you strike out a lot,
Right.
and that's all good. It's all part of it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Steve.
No, you could go.
Well, you were talking about making decisions, and when you decide to do, I covered this in our first podcast, but real quickly, Brian Tracy, you ever read him? Have you read him at all?
No.
Okay, and he says there's 5 reasons why people never achieve financial independence. Number 1, it never occurs to them. They never had an aunt or an uncle, a mom or a dad, a
Right,
neighbor,
a
somebody,
reference point.
right?
Yeah.
A role model, whatever it could be, a teacher even that encouraged them, like Les Brown had. That ever did that, and so they never had an opportunity to say, well, Brian did that. Maybe I could do that.
Yeah.
Right? And then number 2 is if it doesn't occur to them, then they never decide to.
Right.
Even though it might occur to them then, but then they never make the decision to do something.
Yep.
And then, like you said, don't ask why, but how do I get there?
How do I
right?
get there? Yeah.
And then number 3 is procrastinate. They put off today what they can tomorrow to what they could do today, what they should be doing today. Number 4 is they don't understand the concept of delayed gratification, eating hot dogs today so I can have steak tomorrow.
Right.
And then 5th is, and most importantly, is they don't understand the concept of long-range time perspective. And Brian Tracy says life has a law. It's called the law of accumulation. Everything counts. So I came up with a formula for all my family, Brian, and I said to them, LA equals EC. The law of accumulation states everything counts. And I won't go, I will tell it again. So I've been saying that for years, is you can go up to any one of my kids, any time of day, call them on their cell phone if you have their number, call them in the middle of the night. I'll take a $100 bill in odds, 101 odds, your dollar bill in your wallet to a $100 bill in my wallet. You can call Stacy, call John, call Lori, our daughter, and say, your dad says LA equals EC. What does that mean? And they'll tell you. And I had a guy who took me up on that, a young salesman. His name was Chris. And I was telling him the story. I was encouraging him, mentoring him, giving a little seminar. And he came in the next day and he put $2 on my desk. He says, I figured it was worth it. I called Lori and John.
Well, that's talk about a role model. Yeah. You have no excuses.
No, I
Stacey.
don't.
You have no
I
excuses.
absolutely don't. No.
I didn't get that information. I started working for at a kennel, and the owner was a German immigrant, and he started reinforcing some of these things that I read, and I thought, there's other people out there that think this way. Mm-hmm. All those 5 things you mentioned are all decisions. They're basic,
right.
simple decisions. Yeah. So, you don't have to be a rocket scientist. You don't have to be. You can be an idiot like me. And if you make the right decisions, simple decisions, you'll get pretty far down the road.
And Brian Tracy to expound on number 5, which is the most important because it's like the pinnacle of the pyramid, where he says successful people just make better choices more often than unsuccessful people.
Yeah.
He says we all have a ledger. On the left side, let's say the left side. Let's say the right side. On the right side, you say you're making bad decisions. On the left side, you're making good decisions. They just make better decisions. They get up early in the morning. They go to work. They're punctual. They're people of their word. They have consistency in their lives. They make just good life choices for their health, their diet, exercise, relationships with people. And he said, at the end of the day, and at the end of the week, and at the end of the month, and the end of the year, they've just made more better choices.
Yeah, that's
than
it.
unsuccessful. It's
That's
just
it.
really, it's not that
and
hard.
you can't be afraid. This is what I found. One of the few advantages that I have over some of the people I know is that I'm not afraid to fall flat on my face.
Fail fast. Right.
I'm not afraid at all. I mean, in fact, it's it's necessary. You have to fail.
Right.
If you've never failed, you've never learned anything. I think that's somebody
And
said
you've
it
never
more.
tried anything.
Right. So you have to fail. I mean, a Hall of Fame batter is going to strike out 2 out of 3 times. Right. So it's you have to you need those experiences. And if you don't do that, if you don't say I'm absolutely sure about this and then fall flat on your face, you never have the self-reflection to say, where did I make a mistake? How can I improve on it? Is there someone else I can model that has done this?
Right.
Those things never occur to you because you haven't had that experience of, wow, I really don't want to do that again. You know, and so I found that was very, very important for me. Is to take that chance, do it. This is the greatest country on the planet to fail.
No question. Yeah, no question. Absolutely.
And you can fail again and again and again, and the world forgives you and it rewards you with experience and knowledge, and then you get better. You get better at making the good choices.
Yeah, I like what Jim Rohn. You remember him? Okay, so Jim Rohn said one time, one of his tapes or CDs, he said, this is the greatest country in the world to succeed, and you got everything you need here, everything you would possibly need to be successful. He said, nobody ever says, if I could just make it to Poland, I'll be okay.
That's right.
They all want to come here.
They all want to come here. Right.
Yeah. People are not making rafts out of trash to cross the ocean to get from Guatemala to
or Cuba or whatever. Right. Sure.
If it wasn't worth it to do it.
I financed my first business on a credit card. So some bank was dumb enough to give me a credit card when I was 20, and a friend of mine said, "What if you can't pay it back?"
That's great because this is America,
that's
baby.
That's what I said. I'm like, and I had the top of mind kind of answer that just kind of came to me. It's like, I'm 20. I could declare bankruptcy. By the time I'm 26, I'm good again.
Right.
So I knew that that wasn't even a thing in my mind.
Well, failure wasn't in your mind.
No,
it was
no.
not at all. Mine either.
No.
And you take calculated risks. You can't just max your credit card out and spend it on just nonsense.
Right.
But you had a purpose for it.
Right. And that's but you're right. You do have to understand. Cause and effect. Some basic things. Like, I'm astounded by how much credit card debt people have. Somebody that makes $50,000 a year has a $40,000 balance. What are you thinking?
Yeah.
What are you thinking?
Yesterday, Brian and Stacy and Sharon, I read in USA Today. I don't know if that's the great prognosticator of financial acumen or level in America, but they were saying in an article that the average person in America today has 4 credit cards in their wallet, and their average balance is $6,490.
Wow.
So that's you were saying $40,000, but that's pretty close, $24,000. And again, what's the average median income in America? Probably $32,000. I'm guessing at that number. I don't know what it is anymore, but
it's ridiculous, and to have simple discipline, simple like I'm going to pay my credit cards off every month. If I can't, that first month, I gotta look at my spending,
right?
Because there's really no reason. I remember one time, one year, when I was very young, it was about May when I just paid off my my Christmas debt, and I thought, this is the dumbest thing I've ever done. That I've been paying off Christmas for 4 months now.
Right.
I'm never going to do it again. Just simple things like that. Like, I don't want to be in debt to anyone. If I'm in debt, it's because there's a bigger prize.
Exactly.
You leverage it for something more.
Right. Manage debt.
Right.
There's nothing wrong. As a matter of fact, W. Clement Stone started the concept of PMA, positive mental attitude, and also OPM, other people's money, and he really advocated using other people's money to finance your companies and so forth. And that's for another show, I would think. I don't know if Stacy got this seminar. I know I gave it to your brother John. I thought I gave it to all you kids. Finish this sentence for me, if you can. I'm not trying to embarrass you.
Well, I was going to say if I didn't.
Okay. Well, I don't know. If
we'll try it.
It's been a long time since I covered this stuff with you guys. You don't need a credit card.
You need your dad.
Or your dad's credit card.
Very good.
I don't know.
I
missed the seminar.
Yeah, you were barely born then. But I told John, you don't need a credit card until you don't need a credit card.
Oh, right.
And the first credit card I ever had, Brian, was when I was 30-some years old. I went to Belgium, to Europe, on a mission trip from our church, and thought it'd be a good idea to take a credit card to Europe. And I already had my company. I've owned 5 airplanes, so I'd already owned at least 2 or 3 airplanes at that time. I never had a credit card.
Yeah.
And it was a different world back then in the 80s, too. But I got a diners club. Some came in the mail. I thought, well, this is a good idea. I'll take a diners club to Europe, and
Right.
So I thought, well, geez, I've already had all this success, and now they give me a credit card, and I never had any problems with it at all, ever.
So when you started this business on your credit card, and you were 19, and you had this thing going, I don't know your whole story, and I know there's a lot to it, and you eventually became this expert at training animals. But then you had the idea to create a product.
Yeah.
And is this the thing that really kind of changed things for you? Like you had the idea, you weren't in the position to get the patent, but you needed the patent.
Yeah.
Am I getting this right?
Well, yeah, I was consulting for a company that was making some pet products, and one of a training product that's kind of like a basic thing for dog training is a choke chain. It's called the choke chain. And so I put this package together with all these training products and things that people would need for a new pet. And they called me one day and they said, hey, a container fell off a ship and we don't have any choke chain material. Is there something else that we could use? I said, I've had this idea for this invention, for this training product. It's going to be really, really a nice training product, and maybe we could do this. So I lost my patent because I was consulting with them, and so I became like the co-inventor of this patent. And so they made all the money on it, and it really stuck in my craw for a while. And then so years later, I bought the patent back.
Right.
Really?
I bought it back because that was it was my intellectual property.
Mm-hmm.
I invented this thing. It was very, very important to me that I was the sole inventor on that.
Right.
But see, it's kind of a milestone when most ideas you have, somebody's already thought of it, right?
Sure.
But when you really do have a unique idea, that's worth putting on the refrigerator with a magnet, right? It's like, I made that, and no one else has ever thought of that. And it's a reminder that you are the only one who sees things from your perspective. You're the only one that has, the experience that you have. So it reminds you that Ralph Waldo Emerson has a quote, and I'm gonna butcher this, but a lot of times we reject our own ideas simply because they're ours. Mm-hmm. People doubt themselves. Mm-hmm. It's that self-doubt, right? Mm-hmm. And it's a reminder to not doubt yourself. Sure, you're going to have some dopey ideas, but don't doubt them just because they're yours. Right. And just because I couldn't possibly have the next great thing. Well, maybe you do. Right. Maybe you don't. But don't sit there and stew over it and to beat yourself up. See if it works. See if you can. So I think you do have to have kind of a dose of I don't give a crap. I'm going to just throw this out there, see if it sticks. So that's kind of served me well. Also, but yeah, that was a turning point for me because I knew that I could contribute something. And when I did get my first royalty check, it was for about $200, and I sat there and stared at it. That was the first time in my life that I had made money without using my time. It was like, wow, that came right out of my brain, and I'm still getting paid for this. And I got paid for years, and they were always small checks.
Right, it doesn't
but
matter.
It doesn't matter. It was like, man, that's my idea. My idea, a thought, is now making me money. It's not my physical labor. It's this thought. It was a huge advance for me, personal development wise. Yeah.
Right.
If I can just tie something in musically, although I'm not a musician. I mean, I used to play the piano and guitar when I was a kid, but I'm not an accomplished musician by any stretch of the imagination. But I've been watching with great interest Ken Burns's 8-part series of country music. Have you seen it at all?
No.
Okay, I really highly recommend it. Have you seen it yet, Stacey?
I've seen parts of it, and his documentaries are always
so
good. Yeah,
they are, and they cover country music. And I always tell my wife, Sharon, and she's been here with me 52 years. She's from Georgia. And
52 years in a row?
Yeah, in a row.
That's
we took a couple years off, right? So that's funny. But I told her one time, I said, there's only 2 kinds of music in this world, and it's country and Western, right? And that makes her, She's shaking her head
She's
right now.
shaking her head.
She's shaking her right now. But anyway, so Ken Burns did this thing about country music, and they tell a story. Willie Nelson was a prolific songwriter, and he wrote all kinds of hits, crazy. Hello Walls, this is what I want to get to. If you don't know that genre of music, it was a big hit back in the 50s, and I was just a kid then, and it wasn't, I remember the song, just put it that way, but I wasn't really an aficionado, didn't really love stuff like that, just I remember the song. And so he wrote this song called Hello Walls. And he said, according to Ken Burns' documentary, he said, I hocked my guitar so many times that the pawnbroker could play it better than I could.
That's a great line.
Yeah, that's great.
I like that.
Probably the truth. And so he was always down on his luck financially, but had all these great songs in his mind, like you had this invention in your mind. Songwriters are the same thing, or authors, or people that write, creative, And he said he wrote this song, Hello Walls, and he brought it into this place called Tootsie's, and there was a real famous bar down there in Nashville. And before there was Music Row. Music Row hadn't really been invented yet by Chet Atkins and all those guys. And all the guys thought it was just a hoot. They just made the most fun of it at all. And this one guy was saying, hello, shot glass, hello, bar, hello, window, hello, mirror. And they were saying hello to hello, doorway. And the whole thing was hello, walls, how are you today? Something about how are you doing since I've been real blue since she went away. And so he's in this room remembering his lost love. And so Farron Young was a country real star, and Willie came up to him and offered to sell him the song for $500. And Farron said, Willie, this is a good song. He says, I won't buy it from you. He says, I'll loan you $500. He says, with the promise that you won't let anybody record the song but me. And he made the deal. He loaned him $500. He didn't lose his rights to the song. Farron Young went on to record that song. I don't know how much time it transpired, but I think it was reasonably close soon. And it became an instant hit. Willie Nelson, his first royalty check, you said yours was $200?
Yeah.
His first royalty check for Hello Walls was $14,500
Wow.
back in the 50s.
That's a good score.
Yeah, he said that he came into Farron Young said he came into Tootsie's bar after he saw that first royalty check, ran across the bar, grabbed Farron Young, kissed him right on the lips, and said, "Thank you." And Farron Young said, "I've been kissed a lot in my life." He said, "I've never been kissed by anybody."
You can buy a lot of marijuana with that much
exactly
money.
right.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, well, we did.
Or whatever else.
Yeah.
But it made me think of the story about the intellectual property. That's what you're really talking about, something you created. And there's two types of intelligence in this world, according to Napoleon Hill in his book Think and Grow Rich. And that's
Love that book.
It's infinite intelligence and artificial intelligence. And we're not talking about the artificial intelligence that they assign it to today, which they call it AI. But back then, he was calling artificial intelligence, which would be, take for example, the electric light. Supposedly, because there's stories that Edison did invent the first incandescent light. And so he got this idea from infinity, from God. There's these thoughts out there, and it was its time. But then other people created the neon light or some other kind of a light, the LED lights now, right? But the actual infinite intelligence, the first idea for the light, that's like you said, Brian, it's like a lot of people have good ideas, but yours was the one.
Yeah.
Willie Nelson's Hello Walls was the one, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's when you come to that realization that that your idea can actually impact. It's a very, very powerful moment when you realize that. I remember when you sold your first granola or whatever it is. It's like, wow, I can do this.
Yeah.
I can do this. Of course, you had a role model who so you knew it was possible. You had some good guidance, but those inflection points. You can't achieve those without stepping out and getting a little bit beyond that comfort zone to say, well, maybe I can do this.
Here's one of my original thoughts. I didn't sell it or anything, but I used it with my family. So one day, John was 16 years old. That's Stacy's oldest brother. He's 48 now. And he's 16 years old, and he's working in our company. And I walked in one day, that particular day, and I said, "John," I said, "let me sit down a minute." He sat down. I said, "John, I want to tell you something. I want your reaction to it." And he said, "Okay, Dad, what's that?" I said, "One of the greatest benefits to being self-employed is that you're always unemployed." what does that mean to John? I said to John, what does that mean? He immediately said, that you get to go golfing anytime you want, Dad. I said, no, John. I said, that's true, but that's not the benefit of being self-employed. I said, John, to understand what I mean by that, I said, is that you're always selling. You're always out there in a shoe shine and a smile. You're always trying to make it better, make it more valuable. I said, because you got to go back hundreds of years to our agronomist economy. When this country was founded and before even people came over here, the idea of a self-employed person was really based on the barter system. There was not a lot of money to go around. There were not any banks, hardly. And it certainly weren't any banks in America at first. And the concept of banking was as old as the Romans and before, but not for America. And I said, so you had an agronomist economy, and people worked for themselves, growing crops, killing animals, skinning animals, making furs, making furniture, whatever. If it didn't exist, they had to figure out a way to make it and make it happen. And so you had all these years of people being kind of self-employed because if they couldn't make it, they would trade apples for a chair or something like that. And then the Industrial Revolution came along, and that changed everything in America because people left the farms and went to the cities, and they quit working for themselves and started working for somebody. And then after generation after generation after generation after generation after generation after generation after 10 generations it took for people to really get lazy, I'm going to say. I'm not knocking people that work for other people. Please don't misunderstand me. That's not my point here. We're talking about the concept of realizing your dreams. That's all we're really talking about here. We're not here to put anybody down or denigrate anybody's job. God always honors hard work. But because the people that, and I came, my role model, Brian, was part of my role model was, I mentioned my dad was a coal miner. I wasn't around then, of course. He was back when he was a young man. But my mom's side of the family, they were farmers. So they were self-employed. I just didn't get all these seminars from them, but I saw that they owned their own land. My dad's side of the family, they always rented apartments. They always rented. My mom's side of the family always owned. It was a different mindset. You know?
Well, and a different culture because they were from the UK.
Right.
So that was very different over there than it is here. You know, there's a lot of apartments and still so.
You know, I've told people this oftentimes about being in business for yourself. It is like, the hunter-gatherer. You're always thinking. You always have to think because you see what's coming down the road. You can see a little bit down the road and know if you're going to make some money, if you're not going to make some money, if things are good, if things are bad, if some bad news is headed your way. When you work for someone, and I completely appreciate what you said, but it can be taken the wrong way. When you work for someone, it dulls your senses because you go in, you punch out, you do what you're told, and you expect that check. You don't even see when your neck is on the chopping block. You don't see it, and because you're not privy to everything that's going on in your business. Maybe your business gets bought out. You don't see those, so you're like a veal calf where you're just locked into this, and in fact, that's what I was going to say Matrix. That's what the movie was about. The Matrix. You're locked into this thing, and it dulls your senses.
Right.
And so being in business for yourself makes you alive. That's how. Now I know it stresses the hell out of some people, and they could never do it.
Exactly.
But for me, it makes me feel alive. In fact, the most alive I've ever felt in my memory is during the recession. I was selling to retail accounts, and all my retailers were going out of business. Every
Was this
day.
with Pet Key?
Yeah, every day I would wake up and I'd get a phone call from someone who's a friend of mine, husband and wife. They open the store and they've spent everything. They've used their credit cards, and they're heart-wrenching stories. Every single day I was getting these calls. I had several hundred accounts, and every day I was losing a few of them. And I was losing sleep thinking about it. But it's tough. It's tough when you see these things coming down the road. But I felt alive because I could see that my business was changing. And I knew that I couldn't count on these retailers anymore. I started looking into Google AdWords. We've talked about that in the past, and it just changed my business. It took it to talk about the next level. I mean, it did more for my business than anything I had done previously. But I know some people, it would drive them crazy. In fact, my ex-wife, it kind of drove her crazy because it's like, are we going to be able to pay bills? Are we going to be able to? Are we going to be able to? It's like, I don't know, but
Right.
I'm working on it.
Yeah,
I'm
right.
working on it.
Yeah.
And, after a couple months, barricading myself in my office, I figured out a new direction, and it was amazing. But there's some collateral damage there. People, not everybody's cut out for that.
No, right.
So, who was the satirist in the 50s? He said, we can't all be heroes. Somebody has to stand on the curb and wave and clap.
Yeah, right.
So people, there are people who are well suited to be an employee, and other people who are
Absolutely
well
right.
suited to be entrepreneurs. And entrepreneurs, from my experience, are not good employees.
No.
They're the worst. They're the worst.
Absolutely. I've always said, Brian, I wouldn't hire me.
No.
Really,
Yeah.
I really wouldn't.
Well, like Jan Chenard, he started Patagonia, and there was a really interesting podcast with him on how I built this. And the opening line is that he said, if you want to understand the mind of an entrepreneur, you need to follow a juvenile delinquent. Because they're always, it's so
Good
true
point.
in your case, definitely, that they're always looking for a way to be like, I'm not doing this. The way that the system is doing this, the matrix is, I'm not doing that.
I felt oftentimes like I'm recreating the wheel. And I used to describe it before I was successful. I used to describe it as like, I don't know why, but I feel like I'm always driving on the shoulder of the road, hitting the potholes and hitting the old mufflers and the tires on the side of the road. I just need to do things for myself. If you say this is the path, okay, I can see where you're going, but what about this way
exactly,
here?
right. Yeah.
And I used to think even when I was young, you could pay me millions of dollars a year, but if I know where I'm going to be and what I'm making next year, it would drive me crazy. It would drive me nuts.
I had a friend of mine named Richard Perry, and he's hopefully he's still alive today. He's somewhat my senior, but a very successful guy in real estate, owned apartments, and he used to be a top salesman for NCR. And every time they would cut his territory, he'd go buy an apartment building. It would maybe be a little duplex at first, and then he'd buy a 6-unit, then an 8-unit. But he was always looking for something to not feather his nest, but a back. He had an idea.
Yeah.
And it wasn't going to be what he was going to be working for NCR all of his life. And it's just that he realized that if he didn't do it for himself, NCR wasn't going to do it for him.
Right. And the thing is, it keeps your dreams alive. At least for me, it does. I've always been a daydreamer, and I had problems in school when I was very young. Brian's always looking out the window. But when you're a daydreamer,
I was always looking in the window because I skipped school so much.
Brian, he used to tell us that A students work for C students.
There you go.
So
Yeah.
we were not, grades were not the priority in our house,
But see,
which served me well.
If you have a job, I don't care what job it is, if I know where I'm going to be, what I can afford, what I can't afford, it kills my dreams. Because, am I going to buy a Caribbean island next year? I don't know, but you can't rule it out.
Right.
You can't rule it out with me. If you're a pipe fitter or electrician, I can rule that out. That's never going to happen for you.
Right.
Because there's only X amount that's going to command, and that may be fine for you, but I need to keep my dreams alive.
So I didn't finish my thought, not because you interrupted me, but because I had kind of lost my way there a little bit. But now I got back with focus with something you just said. So when Dick Perry was in Wayne State Business School, because he went to college first and then he went out to work for NCR, he said he remembered. Now, by the time I met Dick, he was already well on his way to being very successful. He was 100% into real estate, and he owned his own brokerage firm, and he did apartments and trailer mobile home parks, and he bought and sold land contracts. Sometime we'll get into the story. Remind me, Stacey, sometime we get in the story where he had a guy in his office that found $750,000 in a tree in Howell. It was squirrel hunting. It was a 19-year-old kid.
Wow.
And I met the kid. Well, by the time I met him, he was 30, but I remember the story, but we'll get off in that in a minute. So Dick told me one day, we were talking about owning our own loaf of bread, and we'd rather have a half a loaf than the whole loaf guaranteed to us because, that type of thing. So he said he remembered in a business class he had at Wayne State, probably back in the 50s or early 60s, that had the entire class seated at first, and he said, stand up when I name a salary that you're willing to work for the rest of your life. And he started at $5,000, and I don't remember if anybody stood up, but when he got to $10,000, a bunch of students stood up. And he said, by the time he had everybody in the room standing, they had settled from the, let's say 10 at the entry level, they would go. The top student wanted to have $25,000 for the rest of their life, and they would have sold their ability to make money and their livelihood for $25,000 for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
Right.
Because people were probably making $5,000.
Exactly. Yeah. And you know what? Some people that listen to this kind of talk would say, "Oh, these guys are all about money."
Oh,
now, what I realized early on is that money and people that don't have money see money differently.
Mm-hmm.
Money is a tool.
Absolutely.
Would you ever buy a circular saw and just say, you know what, I'm never going to use this. I just want to keep it nice and pristine. No, it's a tool. It's to be used.
Mm-hmm.
You got to use it in order for it to pay off.
Right.
And if you don't understand that about money, you tend to hoard it.
Right.
And people that don't have money try to hoard it.
Mm-hmm.
It's this weird kind of black magic that happens when you try to hoard it. Because money can do one thing: it can only spend. It can only go that way.
Right.
But if you realize it's a tool, it can help you to get other things, and do other things. And
I like what Les Brown says in one of his tapes. He says money gives you options.
Yeah.
It gives you freedom. First of all, he says money gives you freedom, and I want to express that 100% wholeheartedly, Brian. You're absolutely right. A lot of people I meet, they misunderstand what I'm about, and that's okay. That's fine with me. I never let that. I never judge them by that. I don't get upset with them by that. But money gives you freedom, and then next it gives you options, and then next it gives you an ability to help people that need it, that need help.
Right.
Right.
I was sitting with a friend of mine at a Starbucks. He was at that. This is about 20 years ago, and he was very, very successful. And I was on my way. I was doing really well in my business. And he said, you know what the best thing about being in business for yourself? He said, we can meet here and have coffee, and we have no one to answer to.
Freedom.
But it's that commodity of time that we're all allotted so much. And if you can call your time, I think Bob Dylan said, if you can wake up in the morning, go to bed at night, and make a few of your own decisions during the day, you're a success, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's true. I mean, it's not like I want a bunch of money, so you can't have it, or I can do this, or I can buy fancy cars. That's not what it's about. It's about calling your time your own, and to be able to have that freedom to say, what if I do this, or maybe I'll give this business a shot, or whatever it is. Your time is your own, and you use money as a tool to make your world a better place, and the people around you, and expanding that circle.
Right.
And just it's a very, I don't want to say it's a magnanimous thing, but it's not a selfish thing at all to say I want to make a lot of money.
But would you agree, Brian, that like Jim Rohn said one time, he talked about I don't remember if you remember this talk he gave, but he said he was so broke, he was so not poor, but he was broke, and he said I was so far behind in my promises and my bills and my job. He said, I remember one time I lost $10 and I was physically ill. Do you remember him saying that at all?
No.
And he said, I was physically ill when that happened to me. And he said, and when I walked into the office, someone saw it on my face, and they said to me, what's wrong, Jim? And he said, I lost $10. He said, I'm just sick about it. And he said, maybe someone who found it needed it worse than you. And Jim said, I wasn't accepting that at all. And he said, and I remember thinking that. He said, you see, what had happened was, ladies and gentlemen, what had happened was generosity had not yet seized me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And tell me a little bit about that in your life, Brian, when generosity seized you. You might not remember the moment, but all of us have that in common when you really realize that money's a tool to be generous. It doesn't mean you're going to write a check and give all your money away.
No,
Not
it doesn't.
at all.
It doesn't mean that at all. What it means to me, and when I had this kind of epiphany, I guess, is that you earn an income in direct relation to how much you enrich someone else's life.
Mm-hmm.
No more, no less. It's a rule. It's carved in stone somewhere that the money that you make is given to you freely by other people. So it's about enriching your life. Now, you can call that generosity. I call it some sort of it's some sort of reciprocal universal law. That's for sure.
Right.
That if rather than thinking about what I want and selfish needs, what do you want?
Right.
How do I enrich
How to help you?
your life? And that will tell me. And if I enrich enough people's lives, that's going to directly impact
Right.
what I have. So that some people want to begrudge, say, a professional athlete. You know what? They make a lot of money, but it's that guy sitting at home on the edge of his couch, and maybe that's the only happiness he has during the whole day, is watching that guy's
play. That one-handed catch.
Yeah, one-handed catch. I'm not a sports fan, but I get it. I understand, and so you never begrudge that guy his income, because he's enriching lives.
Right.
Whether you're a comedian or you're a plumber or whatever, that's in direct relation. And so I realized early on that I have to think about it from your perspective. What do you need out of the deal? And I think that's generous from the standpoint of your global thinking. When we're really young, the only thing in our mind is our needs.
Yeah,
we're
absolutely.
selfish.
You're-
Babies are very
right.
selfish, and
You're
to the
right.
degree that you grow out of that,
Right.
that's how you achieve enlightenment or self-actualization, whatever you want to
or
call
generosity, right,
Yeah.
the magnanimity.
it. Yeah.
Zig Ziglar said that if you help enough people get what they want, you'll get what you want. right?
Absolutely.
That's what he says.
Absolutely.
And then in Napoleon Hill's book, Think and Grow Rich, I know you know the book, he has a poem in there called Life. I think it's entitled Life. But he says this: I bargained with life for a penny, and life would pay no more.
Right.
However, I complained at evening when I counted my scanty score. But life is just an employer. It pays you what you ask. But once you've set the wages, then you must bear the task. I worked for a menial's hire, only to learn dismayed that anything I would have asked of life would have willingly paid.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I think you're talking about.
Yeah,
isn't it?
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, and that there are these unwritten rules, that, and unfortunately you don't learn them in school.
No.
I didn't.
No,
I
no.
didn't.
No, they don't teach them in school.
No.
You don't learn these things, and if you pay attention and you see, like I said, I worked for this German immigrant, and he would tell stories about coming here. He didn't know how to speak English, so he ate hamburgers for a month and a half because that's all he could say is hamburger. And and
That's funny.
he became a very
great.
successful man, and it really is up to you. Your expectations, your gratitude. Gratitude plays real heavily into expectations. So I find that people that are successful, they're not greedy. They're very unselfish, and they're very generous, and they're very much look at the world from a. I find the petty people,
Right.
the people that are always scraping, just barely scraping by. Those are the most selfish people,
Right.
and those are the people who will drag you down. Those are the people who really haven't learned the most important part. Thing about life is that life is very, very generous. Nature's
Yes.
generous,
Right.
and it will give you anything you ask for. You
Right.
just haven't asked enough.
Yeah.
Right.
If you say I want to, and that you made me think of. I love hearing about people, when they say they want to they start their own business. I love it. And the first thing I always correct them on, because this is the first thought that comes into a lot of people's mind. Yeah, I want to quit my job. As long as I can pay my bills, I'll be happy. It's like, no. Don't think that way.
Right,
Don't
right.
think, because that's all you're going to do.
Exactly,
If
right,
that's
right.
if that's your thought,
Right.
you'll pay your bills.
And that's all you get.
That's all you're going to get.
Right, you'll get to that level.
Think about, this is going to make me millions, and I don't need to make millions. It's not about what you need to make. It's about, you have big plans.
Right.
So you're going to need a lot of money. You're going to need
Right.
resources.
Yeah.
You're going to need to say, how is the world going to pay me this kind of money?
Right.
How? By looking at the world and seeing what the world needs, how you can impact
Yeah,
that.
how you fulfill that need.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Les Brown said that about, he said, ladies and gentlemen, he said, when I really started out here, he says, I never wanted to be rich. He said, I just wanted to be successful. I wanted to be comfortable. He said, you know what I found out? He said, you got to be rich to be comfortable. He said,
That's right.
He's like my friend Zig Ziglar says. He says, money won't buy happiness, but most people want to find out for themselves.
That's right, yeah.
So we've talked in 2 or 3 podcasts about like the idea about how the universe is this abundant place, and when you can adopt this idea and this attitude of gratitude and abundance as opposed to scarcity, pettiness, and whatever, all of those really have power in your mind, because your mind creates all of these thoughts, and your thoughts create your intention, and then your intention is going to lead to your actions. And when did you realize that? Was it when you had this invention where you saw your check, that was like the power of your mind was infinite? Or were you kind of like on that path? that
Well,
you were...
I mentioned Tony Robbins. And I know he's kind of a polarizing figure. Some people, oh, yeah, he's just a snake oil salesman or whatever. But when I was young, I kept that book in my ratty old car, and I would read it every second because I didn't have that faith. I had no reference points. I had no one in my life that was successful. But I relied on this book, and I believed in it. And I'd read it over and over and over. Awaken the Giant Within. I would read that. I would just keep reading that book.
Right.
When I got to the end, and then I got to the point where it's like, wow, he's a good writer in the sense that you can open up to any chapter,
Right.
and just start reading, and because he always starts with a story, that's going to prepare you for the lesson, So I did that. So it's kind of a fake it till you make it. Like I kept reading it, and it made sense to me.
Right.
It's just nothing else made
Right.
sense, but the fact that I was in charge of my life. No one else.
Totally
And
him.
there's no way that you can make better decisions for me than I can. And then once I got to that point, it was all over because I knew that my destiny was in my hands, and I was comfortable with that. And I think that's probably what was a real kind of a revelation to me, is that that resonated, and you were talking about intelligence, how there's only a couple types of intelligence. The word educate comes from a Latin word which means to bring forth from within. So if it's not inside of you, you can't learn it.
Right.
You got to have some kind of reference point that resonates. So for some reason that resonated with me, and that was it was malignant, and it just grew. So, and of course when I was young, you're invincible. I got real cocky about it. I can make money anytime I want. I can,
Right.
I'm a magician when it comes to this stuff. I can just keep, and you realize what vanity brings you and what hubris brings you, and so you start modulating it. But to know that you're in charge of your show, you're in charge of you're the star of the Stacy Show.
I am.
And everyone
I'm
else
the granola queen of the whole world.
and everybody is a supporting cast member of your show.
Right.
And as simple as that sounds, I think a lot of people don't see it that way.
Yeah, it's hard for them to see it. And speaking of Tony Robbins, the thing where I really became a fan of his, because like you said, he'd been kind of polarizing. I didn't know too much about him, but I had listened to a recording that my dad gave me from Success Magazine where he told his story about how he grew up so poor, his mom had married 7 different guys, all of these problems. And the recording's really good, and I don't want to waste a lot of time talking about it, but the bottom line to the whole story was that he realized after all of this adversity, and he realized it as a young man, I think he was like 14 or 15 years old, that beliefs create and beliefs destroy. And if he could look at his life, and on paper, objectively, it was a disaster. It was terrible. Here's his mom. She's an alcoholic. She beats him
with coat hangers.
With
right?
coat hangers, just these vicious experiences.
Seven fathers.
Seven fathers, not enough food in the house, no food on Thanksgiving.
Right.
That was the sort of the focus of the story, about how somebody tried to give them charity on Thanksgiving, and one of his stepdads, I don't remember which one it was,
he was drunk.
7 or 6, slammed the door in the guy's face and wouldn't accept the Thanksgiving turkey because of his pride. And Tony Robbins couldn't understand
Which
that.
is why today Tony Robbins gives away 50,000 or 350,000 Thanksgiving meals every Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah, he's got a whole
Gives you
initiative
chills,
that he
doesn't
does
Wow,
that
that's good.
he tries to fight hunger and all this stuff. But when I really heard that, I was a convert. I was like, I love this guy because he's absolutely right. Your beliefs create and your beliefs destroy, and it's tied to this notion of what is real and what is true. And I think everybody has this narrative in their life, the story that they tell themselves about themselves, and the story that they tell themselves about other people. And then that's their belief.
Yeah.
And that either creates something really good. It actually creates the reality, right? Whether it's good or it's bad. Or the belief destroys the hope, the spirit,
Right.
the ambition,
Right.
the dream, all
Absolutely.
of that stuff.
That is a cornerstone of a lot of thinking. In fact, I remember being out to dinner with my younger brother, and he's not a real optimistic guy. I said, "Can you think of 5 things right now you could do that would totally ruin your life? That instantly ruin your life?" He said, "Yeah, well, I could rob a bank. I could kill somebody. I could, he rattled them off, right?
Right.
He said those would, and I said,
Right.
"Can you name 5 things that will instantly make your life better?" And he said, oh, well, that doesn't work that way. If you want to make your life better, it takes a long time. See, and that's one of those limiting beliefs. When you believe that, I could do that, but it would take forever. That's the biggest lie you can tell yourself. You can make changes right now, right now that make things better. And it sounds hokey, but if you don't want to believe it, that's to your detriment. I mean, because you're right. Those beliefs, and that's a big thing with Tony Robbins, and that was something that really hit me hard as a youngster too. Is that, it's up to you. You can choose what you believe, and you got to listen to that voice inside, and it has to resonate, because if you don't believe it, it's not going to sit well. So you have to find those things, and everybody gets to it in a different path. So you got to find those things that really, really resonate, but you have to cut out all the noise, because those limiting beliefs, they're not all your own. In fact, most of them come from other people that say you can't do it. Like, my father telling me, "Oh, you can't. I'll get you a job at Ford Motor Company." And I think, you bitch about your job every day.
Right.
And
why would you do that to me?
You want that from me?
Yeah.
Yes, they do. Yeah, they do. Yeah, they want that.
And I don't
reinforces them.
Yeah, I don't want that. I have no idea what's out there, but I don't want that. I don't want what you're doing. So, that was that kind of helped guide me as well. But I didn't have a lot of reference points. But to read something good, get a hold of something. You got to feed your brain good information. And it's not from hanging around your dopey friends or doing things that they're doing. If you don't want the life that they have, you got to find other role models. You got to find other information. And I was always a junkie for information, anyways. And I wanted good stuff. And that hit me. It hit me real hard. I'll pick up a Tony Robbins book now, and some of it kind of seems hokey, but it's because I've learned a lot of those lessons, and I'm ready for the next thing. And once you set yourself on fire with that good information. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's kind of like going back to kindergarten.
Right.
It's interesting you say that though, Brian. And this, who Darren Hardy is? He's the editor and publisher of Success Magazine now.
Okay.
And that was a magazine that was just life changing for me. I got it I'll reiterate the story, but I'll back up a little bit. I've told the audience the story before. When I graduated from college, my cheapest friend gave me a subscription to Success Unlimited magazine for my graduation gift from college, and everyone else was giving me $20, and he gives me this $3.97 subscription to Success Unlimited magazine in 1971, and he handed me $1 million. I didn't know it. He didn't know it, but I didn't know it at the time. Darren Hardy now, W. Clement Stone was the owner and publisher of Success Unlimited magazine. Og Mandino was his managing editor.
Yeah, okay? Greatest salesman in the world, right?
Greatest secret in the world, right? And he. I lost my train of thought. Hang on a second. I'm going somewhere with this.
I do that all the time.
Yeah.
I lose my train of thought like it's my job.
Yeah, because I'm always thinking about what else I'm going to say.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
What were we talking about just before that?
Og Mandino. Okay, come on, let's back up.
The Success magazine. He handed you $1 million.
When you said it seems like how'd you put it? Child's play, or that's not the word. Cheesy. You didn't say cheesy.
Yeah, like kind of hokey.
Hokey. Yeah, that's the word you used. And I heard Darren Hardy, who's now the editor of Success magazine, say to a guest he had on there, because he would give a CD with every session of every edition of Success magazine, and so the magazine was great, and then they'd have a CD with 5 people in there telling something about their story. It was really brilliant. And we have a stack of those CDs in my son's office. And in one of the CDs, Darren Hardy, the editor, is interviewing a gentleman like you're being interviewed by Stacy. And he said, the guy said something that was kind of very, very basic, very rudimentary. And Darren said, that's really interesting you'd say that. He says, because everybody knows that. He says, but sometimes it's more important to be reminded of something we already know than to learn something new. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it's not really... I can't remember the word you just said about
hokey.
Hokey, yeah, hokey. Yeah. It's not hokey or cheesy. It's powerful.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to phrase it that way because you're absolutely right. And I've done that many times where I relearn a lesson that I thought I learned before. Mm-hmm. But once you finally do, the Chinese has they have a saying that once a blade of grass becomes a man, You can no longer go back to being a blade of grass. And it just has some lessons you learn. It's like, oh yeah, I remember learning that. I remember where I was in my life when I learned that. So it's kind of like going back and reading, red fish, one fish, two fish, red fish, blue fish, Dr. Seuss. It's like, yeah, it's a great book. I learned that. But you're right. You will relearn lessons until you really get it down pat.
Well, not only relearn them though, Brian. It's just to be reminded.
Yeah.
To be reminded of it, because that way it keeps the saw sharp, and you realize where you came from, and say, yeah, I did learn that lesson, and you won't really ever forget it.
Right.
But you're not always utilizing it.
Well, I think it helps you to have a little bit more compassion and empathy for people who have never been exposed to it, or they're still at that level. So if what's great about Tony Robbins is that if you're open to it, there's this sort of, it's like a gateway. He's like the gateway drug, right? And he's the one who's gonna like get you on this path, and then that's great. And then you want more of that, and then you start reading different people and taking the thoughts are like building blocks, right? And they're all kind of the same idea, the same principles, the abundance, the scarcity, the beliefs, the manifestation, the power of your mind. And all of these writers and all of these thinkers and all of these authors are basically saying the same thing, but some of them are saying in a deeper way, in a more complex way, especially if you kind of take it down the road of like spirituality and yoga and all of that. All of those people have this completely different perspective on basically the same thing. And what's great about that is that it appeals to so many people. But sometimes when you've already been like on a steady diet of this stuff, it happens to me where I hear people say something, I'm like, oh my God, who thinks that?
Yeah, right.
But at some point, I might have thought that.
Sure.
And it helps me to think like, well, wait a minute, this person, this is a new concept to them. And in their mind, of course they're the victim in this story because all of society's telling them and validating them and, quote, rewarding them for being a victim in their story.
Sure.
And it's a social agreement. And it kind of checks me because I realize, like, I'm really lucky because I understood this.
Right.
And I need to be more careful about judging somebody who's not embracing it right away.
Yeah.
When I started, you missed the first episode, but when I started saying I never had a bad day in my life, I started in 1978. I owned a Ram's Horn restaurant. And my manager,
one of my favorites growing up. Are you kidding? Which one did you own?
Wayne, Michigan.
Okay.
And so my manager, Eddie Brossi, was at the cash register. I was sitting there having a cup of coffee right by the register, and a gentleman came up to pay his bill, and they started looking at each other, and I know you. And, no, where do I know you from? And so they started going down memory lane, and all of a sudden both of them said, Carl's in Plymouth. And then in unison, Brian, they both said, right as if they'd rehearsed it, I've never had a bad day in my life. And I looked at, because I was already into this anyway. I was 30 years old. I've been doing this since I was 21, maybe a little sooner. So I'd already been a student. And when I heard that, it just resonated with me right away. I said, what? And they said, Carl Taylor, he had 5 heart attacks and he never had a bad day in his life. And they said, who is this guy? And they said, well, he owns Carl's over in Plymouth. It's Starkweather and Plymouth Road. It's still there, but it's not called Carl's anymore. And he said, every time you'd see Carl, you'd say, Carl, how are you? And he'd say, never had a bad day. Never had a bad day in my life. And I loved that. I just absolutely loved it. And I started saying it ever since. And you'd be surprised, maybe you wouldn't be, but over the years that I would say that, because everybody makes conversation. Brian, how are you? I'm fine. How are you? And then I'd say, never had a bad day in my life, right? Well, it catches them up short. And then first of all, they don't believe it.
Right.
Or they don't hear you correctly. It's amazing the number of people that think you're complaining about your day.
Yeah.
This is a terrible day. That's all they hear.
They hear bad day.
Bad day. I'm having a bad day in my life. This is the worst day of my life. Yeah. I've never had a bad day in my life, right? But that's where they're wired up, right? Yeah. And so it really got me to thinking about how that we have this narrative going around in our mind. So we had dinner the other night with a friend of ours we've known for over 25 years, and he told Sharon at the dinner table, his wife, I'm not going to mention his name. So he said, he said, and then he looked at Sharon and he said, and then you got this guy sitting here. He said, the first time I ever met him 25 years ago, I never had a bad day in my life. I went home with my wife in the car and said, who does that guy think he is? He's never had a bad day in his life. And he's going on and he's complimenting me. Not that I need to be complimented. That's not the point. But he's complimenting. He said, I really didn't understand who you were, what you were about, what you were thinking, the way you are. I really realized that you choose not to have bad days. You make your bad days into good days, right?
Right.
Because it's all an opportunity. It's happening, So
Right.
you can either try to resist it from happening, which does nothing, or you can embrace it and try to find the solution and the opportunity and to go from there. But it is amazing. It's this cultural agreement that it's a bad day. So many
Right.
people are hearing you
right.
say bad day. Those are the words that they pick out, which is really, if you can just train your mind to do something different. Excellent. When you hear
Excellent,
something
yeah.
has gone wrong, you
Right.
just say excellent. And over the summer, I had a fire in my house, and
Yeah.
I was surprised by it.
Yeah,
was, I was outside
As you should
and
be.
Enjoying the nice
All in the
day,
Department
and
of Fire.
I was feeding Ramona actually
Mm-hmm.
outside on the deck. And I heard this weird popping sound, and I thought maybe one of the other dogs knocked something down off the counter. And then I heard it again. I thought, oh, geez, they're really into something. I got to go in and see what's going on. And I walk in, and it's like smoke. It's black. It smells. And I go over the stove. I thought maybe I had left it on inadvertently, and it wasn't. And then I was a little uncomfortable because I know how to put out a kitchen fire because I'm a chef. So a kitchen fire is not a problem for me. But then I realized this is a real fire. Like there's something that is not related to food, which is out of my realm of expertise, has caught on fire, and I don't know what to do about it. And so I was able to put it out, and I called my dad, and he's like, "Oh, hey, how's it going?" And you can tell him the rest because you were on the receiving end of this.
Well, she called me, and I'm always thrilled to hear one of my kids call me, and
Yeah.
I see their name on the phone, and she called me. I said, "Hey, honey, how are you today? Everything going okay?" And she says, "Well, excellent." And I said, "What? Oh, great. What's going on?" You know, she says, "I have a fire at my house."
That really challenged that perspective,
It
but
was-
you hung
It
in there
was
strong.
excellent. Yeah. It's excellent. The house is on fire. It's excellent.
Yeah.
I got the fire out, and the fire department is coming. And because what am I going to do? I'm going to freak out. Like
Right.
that doesn't help anything. That doesn't make
But
anything better. And
that was a training that we had
Yeah.
from our life, and W. Clement Stone trained me on that, where he said, "I knew I was going to get bad news all my life, I was going to get good news all my life." So I trained myself to always have the same reaction, to take a deep breath, put a big smile on my face, no matter what the news,
Yeah.
and say,
Yeah.
"Excellent." He says, because if it was negative, he said, put me in the frame of mind to solve the problem.
Right.
He says, if it was positive, that's excellent.
And when I was going through Dale Carnegie training, Ralph Nichols at that time was the guy who owned all of our franchise in southeastern Michigan and even part of West Michigan. And Ralph was a super dynamic guy, like just almost like he's not real, right? Like he's almost like a character. But that's Ralph. He really is that real. And when we were going through training, he gave us the story about how he was supposed to deliver something when he was like in the prime of his career. And at that time he was teaching almost every Dale Carnegie class in southeastern Michigan and delivering to the big three when the money was just like hand over fist. They're training all their employees. They can't sell the cars fast enough. And he had just found out that his mom was very sick and on her deathbed. And it's bad news, right? Like this is news that you don't want to hear right before you're going to go on in front of probably your biggest potential customer and give them this presentation. He said that he knew he had to ramp himself up. And he's a Dale Carnegie instructor, so he has to do what Mr. Carnegie says, which is to be 10 times more enthusiastic about whatever it is that you would
If
originally
you
do.
act enthusiastic,
You
you'll
will be
enthusiastic. Right.
And so he went into the men's room and started jumping up and down and yelling at the top of his lungs, "If you act enthusiastic, you will be enthusiastic. If you act enthusiastic, you will be." And so he did this, and these people are coming in and out of the men's room like, this guy is totally crazy. And he went out there and he delivered his speech, and he went on with whatever he needed to go on with. But it's this choice, it's this attitude to train your brain to do what you need it to do, because the opposite. There's no solution in the opposite, right?
Well, that's exactly it. Yeah. Well, where's that going to get you?
Right.
Yeah. How's that doing for you? That's you're right. So there's really only one choice. There's only one choice, because if you're not thankful, if you don't have gratitude, if you don't say it's an outstanding day, okay, you don't believe that? Okay, it's a crappy day.
Yeah, you get to choose.
You get to choose if that's what you want to. If that's what you want to believe in, we were talking about Tony Robbins. the way he phrased it was, no matter how crappy it is, you say, what's good about this? What's good about this situation? And at first you think there's nothing good about it. But again, it's all about asking yourself good questions. And that's a great question. What's good about this? You know, you lose all your money, right, at the craps table. What's good about this? Well, it gives me a chance to reevaluate my life, right? So whatever it is, there's always a different way of looking at things. And, you know, if you default to the, you know, well, things are crappy, well, it's too bad, because life is big. Life is it can be as big or as confining as you want it to be, and it is a choice. And that's something that, man, people don't believe that it's actually their choice whether their day is going to be good. Again, I was talking to my little brother who's kind of not a real optimistic guy. My wife at the time, she said, do you feel lucky? I said, man, I feel like I'm the luckiest person in the world. And so I looked at my brother and his wife. I said, do you feel like you're lucky? And they both shook their head no. They're like, no, we're the most unlucky people on the planet. Isn't that a shame?
Yeah. Sad.
That's sad, right? To say that out loud to the universe, that I'm unlucky.
Yeah, I mean, to say it out loud is like, ooh, it gives it, you know.
Yeah, and I always feel the same way, Brian. I just feel like I'm the luckiest guy in the world.
Absolutely.
You know? It's more than luck, but I mean, that feeling. Yeah. You know, it's a positive feeling. That's just, it's so fulfilling. It's so enthralling. It's so exciting. It's so, it makes you feel alive.
And luck, the word luck does kind of diminish it, but you're right. You're fortunate.
Right.
You know, what's good about today? You can see that side of it, and that's. Man, it's so important. It's everything. You know, somebody can strip you of everything in this world can be taken away from you, except your attitude. You voluntarily give that away. If you surrender. You surrender that, and you're lost. Yeah, you got to have that attitude. You know, and if you don't have the right attitude, and again, it's a decision. You're sinking yourself, and it's you know, shame on you. You know, life's big.
Years ago, I didn't come up with this idea myself, but I read some guy said this about, you know, he said you could take anybody that knows what they know how to make money, and you could drop them out of an airplane with a parachute anywhere in America where there's an economy, or even without one economy, but hopefully an economy, and they'd be back on top in not very long a time. And so I'd be repeating that to my kids and my wife and so forth. And then the 1988 stock market crash came. I think it was 1988, and I lost a ton of money. Lost a ton of money. And Sharon was so supportive to me. And she looked at me and she said, well, you know, honey, you always said you could start all over again. She says, maybe this is going to be your chance, right? Yeah. I mean, that's the kind of wife I have. You know,
that's an amazing outlook. That's an amazing outlook. And you need that. You bring up a good point. You know, when your spouse, the person that's closest to you, man, that's the only person you let inside the fortress, right? You can say anything you want to me. I don't care. But the person I come home to, right. If she's, you know, got that same crappy attitude, that is a very tough thing to get over. So I'm sure you thanked her more than once for that comment, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, she's always believed in me. She's always believed in me.
That's a powerful thing.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. It really was. Before we stop, I want to ask Brian one question.
Yeah.
So, did you start your first business when you were 19?
Yeah.
Okay, and then your first royalty check came when you were 19? That was later on.
I was 20, 21. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
All right. And then that was doing something with pets? Okay. Yep. And then what happened there? We'll give the Reader's Digest condensed version.
Well, I was training dogs.
Okay.
And training dogs means I got to go out there. I got to get bit. I got to talk to the owners. There's only so many hours in the week, right? And
so many bites your skin.
So many bites, right? And I was doing a lot of attack training and stuff like that, and it was fun. But yeah, I always get hurt. So I decided to put all my training on a videotape, and I thought this is the way I can multiply myself.
Okay,
right?
Very good.
And then I thought, wow, I can help a lot of people. And getting back to what we were talking about before, the number of people that you enrich has a lot to do with what you're going to receive, right? So if I can only train one person at a time, you know, it's only a matter of time. I had 8 training schools in the Detroit metro area by the time I was 22, and I realized I can only be in so many places at once, one place at once, and so this is the end of the road for me here. I gotta learn how to multiply myself, and so
And you were 20.
Yeah.
20, okay.
Yeah, and then so I started doing everything on video, and then I started serving bigger clients and working through retailers, and then later on I had my microchip, a pet microchip. I make my own pet microchip, and
That was patented also?
yeah, and I realized that the key is, and then it was reinforced over and over by everything I read that the how many people you enrich determines your riches and what the world will do for you. So you got to do a lot of good for a lot of people in order for that to come back to you. So it just started growing from there. So now the question is, how can we get a bigger audience? How can we get a bigger, during the recession, I mentioned that I came up with a new business model. I discovered Google AdWords, to advertise my microchip, my business, and I started out with $50. I put $50, and next day I had made like $100, and I'm like, wow, I doubled my money. So.
Okay.
I next day I did 100, and then I ran that for a couple weeks, and then 200, then 400, and now I spend about $5,000 a day on Google ads, and it's because you ask maybe a little bit different question, and I realize that if I get the word out enough, if I can help you out. And I can help 2 people out, and I can help 20 people out. I can help 20,000 people. I can help 50,000 people. So getting that word out, expanding your reach, is real important. It's easier now than it's ever been.
Yeah, it gets easier.
I don't have much sympathy for kids who's I can't find a job. I can't do this. Bull.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's so much easier now. You know what I used to do when I first started training? They had yellow pages.
Oh yeah, sure.
And I would advertise my dog training classes in all the yellow pages because you pay.
Right.
When at the beginning of the year,
right?
So I always realized that if I can't pay for this, my name is still going to be in all these books the rest of the year. So I figured, I just got to get the word out to everybody, right? So I was in all 5, in the Detroit metro area. There are 5 major yellow pages.
Northwest, Macomb.
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
I got it.
So I was in all of them. And one year I did come up short, and I also learned about leverage because I couldn't pay for that. And then the next year, my Yellow Pages rep was like, hey, you didn't pay us for last year. And I'm like, yeah, I couldn't afford it. Things were bad. Well, can you, advertise this year? I'll give you, 50% off of what you owe us if you advertise next year. I'm like, things have changed. I think I got a little leverage in this now. When you it was
you don't do it on purpose, but you learn. You learn how to negotiate.
You learn how to negotiate.
That's what it is. There's always another price. There's always nobody pays the same price.
Exactly.
That's another thing you learn as an entrepreneur.
So you learn a lot of things. You learn right. So, but the main thing is I had to get the word out. No matter what it cost me, I had to get the word out, and I paid my bills. I paid everything I owed.
Right.
But you have to expand your reach if you're going to grow as a person, and that means understanding more about what the world needs from you and what you have to offer, and as an employee, it just never worked out for me that way. It's like I felt like a veal calf where I'm just kind of sequestered in this, and I can't let my really let my talents go. So I think that's that's a good take home message, to realize that your benefit, what the universe gives you is directly in proportion to how much you're benefiting your circle and the world around you.
Yeah. Well, Brian Donovan, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks. This was fun.
I learned a lot and really enjoyed it.
So did I. Thank you.
Stacy,
fun.
thank you.
Will you come back?
Sharon, thank you.
Absolutely.
Awesome. All right.
Wonderful.
Well, this is Doc Sloan. I've never had a bad day in my life. It's a choice. Thanks for listening. That was very nice, Brian.
That was so fun. This is our best one yet.
Yeah.
Super good. Thanks for staying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I-
So are you still in that business?